Hello and welcome. Today we're going to be talking about AI image generation and citation in APA style. Now, to do this, we have to acknowledge some inherent limitations. AI image generation is something that can create materials that are potentially very accurate and photorealistic, and it can also sometimes do things like give someone three hands, whether we want to or not. And so, with all such things in APA style and other scholarly traditions, it is important to acknowledge the sources and to acknowledge the process. And so, while there are some specific rules, when we are using AI image generated material, we want to acknowledge how it was made, where it was made, and with what versions. So, we'll talk about more of that as we go through here. So, the general rules are, to sum up what we were just talking about, to always acknowledge the source, always describe the generation process, and to keep in mind the limitations and inaccuracies that may be present. Now, that's not so different from working with any other source in APA style, where we acknowledge here's where the information came from. If it's something that is important to the discussion, and it usually is, something about how they arrived at that. For example, Smith and Jones did a survey of 152 mid-level marketing managers, and to acknowledge the limitations and inaccuracies. They did not look at this other group, so we're not sure how directly applicable this might be. So not so different. In this case, we're just acknowledging, oh, created by, say, ChatGPT. So OpenAI product, cite the version, tell us what you told the generator, and keep in mind that we shouldn't be using this for things that require the real thing or to as representative of the real thing in most cases. So we can look at the official APA guidelines, and before they do that, you might be looking at this URL and wondering, why are we looking at a blog entry? And the answer is simple, a timing. So with APA 6th edition, the digital object identifier system was going through multiple revisions during the life of 6th edition. And so they posted different ways to do that as the technology improved and made things simpler to their blog. Same thing with various clarification rules and for things, new classes of stuff that came up before the new edition was being released. And so we are currently following APA 7th edition. This blog entry gives supplemental rules for APA 7th edition to account for the fact that ChatGPT and all the AI generated uh, content and generators that have come out since are post-dating that release of 7th edition in October 2019. Now, we can take a quick look at that, but we're going to briefly summarize these rules later. So if you're looking at a slide deck and saying, I don't have a copy of that, don't worry. But if you're looking at the video, just follow along. So here's this post by one of the APA style editors, how to cite ChatGPT. And there's some background about this, and there's some explanation of what we just talked about the process and considerations as you're considering to use that material. And then here is an example of some text written in APA style describing using the image generator. And here's the reference entry that you would have corresponding to that. Now there's more stuff here, breaking it down, but those are the essential elements. So, and there is another policy here about using generative AI. If you're going through one of their publications, we're not worried about that right now. So back to our slides. So let's zoom in on the essential elements. For any AI generated elements, we need to have a reference. In this case, the example you see on the slide, it's referring to OpenAI, the creators of ChatGPT, and their product, ChatGPT, that is the title. And then because they're updating things by the day that you used it is generally the corresponding version. And then large language model is just a descriptive tag, just like a YouTube reference, which have video in square brackets, and then the URL for accessing it. Parenthetical citation, that's going to be your standard author date information. Narrative citation, same deal. Now, if you're at ACU, you have free access to Microsoft Copilot, which is another AI content generator, a large language model, if you will. And so if you were going to be citing that, well, again, you're going to be citing the year, the publisher, the author in this case is Microsoft. There's claimed corporate authorship. So Microsoft 2025, Copilot is the title of the product. February 6th is the day that we used this. And large language model is a descriptor, and then the URL for accessing it. Again, that's going to be citations with author date, Microsoft 2025. So we could, if you need, take a quick look at the APA guidelines for figures, but I think you'll find that this is going to be fairly self-explanatory, but let's just glance at that really quick. The essential elements here are going to be the figure numbering, the title of the figure, and then any notes that might go underneath that. And of course, the figure itself. All right, now we're going to follow along with a few elements. Now, I have here a number of images sent over by my colleague, Sarah. Now, for integrating these into a presentation, we have the bare elements, the different prompts that were used to create these images. I know that they were made using Microsoft Copilot. I know they were made on a particular day. And then we'll go ahead and caption these in APA style and introduce how to discuss them. So this first one here, the prompt was to make an image of the ACU Online Writing Center tutors as cats. And, if we look at this image, one of the reasons we never want to pass these off as real life things or as a work of an illustrator is that there's some things that are definitely inaccurate here. Now, you might be using this as part of the paper discussing the limitations of AI, sure. And you might be using this to generate pictures for discussion. Okay, that's fine. But you always want to acknowledge the limitations and the source and not pass this off as, something that has been invented by a human. So our first task is just to accomplish the basics of labeling this. This is going to be figure 1, and then we'll call this an AI. Now, this is just a descriptive image, and the image generated is close enough to the prompt that we can reuse some of this text. But let's do some of the styling first and then talk about how to reference. So the figure label should be bolded. The figure caption or title should be double spaced and italics. And now we have the question for how to reference the image. Well, let's create a references section here. And our first image is going to be and of course, Copilot is the title here, so that'll be italicized. And then whichever day, February 5th, February 6th, whatever it is, we use a shorthand here. And remember, we need to label this as a large language model, which basically saying we can feed it text instructions. And there we are. We have our reference for the AI system. So let's now look at how we might integrate this. To test the ability of an AI image generator, now let's go ahead and remove a few extraneous things here. So our initial instruction there, we can take out here. And in this case, the reason this is spilling over into another page is just because of the size of the image here. So I could adjust that slightly so we can look at this together. And so we have the initial introduction here. And then we have the label with a number. We have the title or caption. We have the discussion, the image here. And now it's probably a good idea to discuss it. Since our paragraph here is talking about testing the ability, now, if we look at this, we see, all right, there's other things that could be discussed. Looks like there's some issues with the computer mice, but overall, for our discussion, this may be enough. Now, let's say we took one of these images here, and let's just label them really quick. Figure 2, figure 3, figure 4, figure 5, figure 6. Now, these are all generated using Copilot, so let's give them some titles. Now, again, we're going to want to follow our basic stylization for APA style. So these need to be bolded, these need to be italicized. And remember, you need to not just apply that to add the italics, you need to make sure that this is following title case capitalization. Now, if we're not discussing the specifics in the paragraph leading up to it, we can also give this information in a note afterwards. And ta-da, we have satisfied our requirement to label this as an AI-generated map, to note how it was made, with what, and the specific instructions. Now let's pick another one of these here, and let's go with our Eiffel Tower here. Again, we want to format that. Now, if we look at the made of cats, it's not strictly true. We have lots of cats over it, but there's still that metal structure and there are cats on clouds and things like that. So made of cats is probably not accurate. But if we say featuring cats, that is accurately descriptive. Now, we could be discussing this and citing it, or again, we can put a note here. And you might find it redundant to keep citing this, but in some cases, people have been doing these image generations over a period of time, and there may be different versions that they're citing, thus with different citations. So we always want to clarify what we're referring to. Now, I want to call attention to one of the features of this generator here. It doesn't really have a good idea of context, and so the fact that the foreground has an Eiffel Tower has not stopped the image generator from putting multiple Eiffel Towers in the background of this image of the Eiffel Tower. So again, when something is generated in this way, there are significant potential limitations, and so we are trying to acknowledge this in our discussion. So you can continue working on this, captioning these other images, but the basic principle is going to be the same. We need to label it as an image. We need to title it. We need to describe the process that was generated either in the paragraph or in a note below, as you saw us do here. And we need to have, of course, a reference here. Now, in this case, the reference referring to the model being used is going to be the same throughout. So we only need one reference, but we need the instructions used to be acknowledged somewhere in this document for each of these images. So I hope this little tour through using AI-generated elements has been helpful. We can always be reached at Online Writing Center at acu.edu. You can go to my.acu.edu and select the Online Writing Center from the groups page to schedule an appointment, and of course, visit our website. Thanks for joining us.